you had listened to something or read something about started dogs versus puppies. And that's a common thing that comes up in some of the avenues that somebody would find themselves considering a started dog. What are some of the misconceptions, and maybe define what a started dog is, and then we'll go from there.
Well, defining what a started dog is depends. And that depends on the person you're talking to. But I think that there's some things that it should absolutely have. First off, gun condition. Secondly, introduction to birds. Most people don't have access to a quail or a chucker to introduce them to the bird the first time. They don't have access to large tracts of land to let the dog run to what its potential is. But to me, person you're getting a started dog from, you need to talk to them and find out exactly what they mean by started. Go out and see the dog. Is it doing what you want?
It's almost apples to oranges, really, because, a puppy, what comes to mind is an 8-week-old puppy, whereas a started dog could be 6 months old, or a started dog could be 5 years old. And then it's all what characteristics or what training experience does that individual started dog have? So to your point, it's what the person means by a started dog is a big difference.
A lot of the reason people want started dogs is a lot of people don't have the time, or they don't know how to do these things. Now, to a point, it's not rocket science. You can learn how to do it. To come in to start, I would recommend.
Hey everyone, Nick Larson here, host of the Birdshot Podcast, the show where we go beyond the flush to explore the full upland hunting experience with guests from all across the uplands, from shotguns to bird dogs to habitat and conservation, and the traditions that connect all of us to a life afield. The Birdshot Podcast is presented by Onyx Hunt and supported by folks just like you via our Patreon community. If you want to stay up to date and not miss any of our upcoming episodes, be sure to subscribe and follow the show in your podcast player, or YouTube, wherever you're listening or watching today. Go ahead and tap that button. Thank you for doing so. And with that said, let's get into today's conversation on the Birdshot Podcast. All right, Mark, welcome to the show, and we are jumping right in. Thank you for joining me today. But just before I hit record here, we were chatting. I actually heard from I always hear from people after we interview Andy Waymont on the show, and nobody's actually sent me a screenshot of their Amazon cart, but there's a lot of humorous comments towards how many books they bought, and it sounds like you were one of those people, Mark.
Absolutely. I went out right after I listened to it and bought Big Red. And as soon as that one's done, and I wanted a first edition copy. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find one. I thought I had it, but the description was wrong. And then once that's done, I'll look for the next one, look for first edition. I like first editions. I like books that are autographed as well. I've got one autographed by Delmar Smith. I've got a limited edition from Benno Williams that's autographed, leather bound, all that stuff.
Which Benno Williams book it was?
It's Western Wings. I believe it's the only one he ever did that way. It's signed and numbered copy.
So I got you. Yeah.
I've got one from France on the breed that a friend of mine over there, a judge, sent me as a Christmas present that it was autographed as well. So I just like that kind of stuff. I'm old enough where I like books.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what Mark and I were talking before we flipped the switch here is how Mark has been spending. Well, you said something to the effect of not turning your TV on in 9 months because you preferred to read and you have other things to do. And that sounds admirable to me. That's for sure.
Yeah. Plus I have a lot of dogs and a horse. So
yeah. Oh, a horse too.
Yep.
Okay. We might have to get into that.
Oh, you should get one.
Well, yeah, like I need a hole in my head. There's got to be, I know there's some funny lines about, bird dogs, and like if you're into bird dogs, a horse is like 10 times, right?
I think a horse is much, much easier than dogs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I use hay rounds, bales for feeding. So I just throw it out there and I don't have to feed him. Automatic water. He's just content on his own.
When you say automatic water, like you got a pond or you're saying you've got coming out of the hose and
it's like a 15-gallon tank. Yeah. So I think they're very easy myself. This is the third one I've owned.
God, I don't know the first thing about horses. We're going to come back to that, but I don't want to leave books just yet. How much did you know, if anything, about Big Red before that episode? Had you heard of it? Did you read it when you were younger?
I don't believe I knew anything. Now, take into consideration, I'm 67 now. How much do I remember from 50 plus years ago is debatable. Plus, I had a stroke a few years ago, so I always blame my memory on that.
Oh, man. How's your recovery going?
I had it on a Tuesday. I was handling dogs in a field trial on Saturday. It was mild. I just wouldn't get on a horse. My balance was off. So,
but you're riding horses again now.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. The big red, and again, we won't belabor it here because we talked about it with Andy as well. But that one, I didn't know anything about that until my adult life. But when we talked about it the first time on the show, I remember getting messages from friends saying, "Oh yeah, I read that in grade school or whatever," and I'd or be kind of jealous, like, I wish I would have read that in grade school. But whether you're 10 years old or 67 years old, it's still a pretty enjoyable read.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. So
yeah, and that one, I know that I've got the reprint edition of Big Red for sure. I got some older copies of the other ones, Irish Red and Outlaw Red, I think is the three. Andy has been communicating with me since that episode, and he's now finished all three of them and is on to other things. And I am currently reading Drummer in the Woods by Burton Spiller, which I had not read prior, and I grabbed a copy of that while I was doing the interview with him. So I've been, it's dang near mid-August when Mark and I are recording this, and you and me and everybody listening probably are anxiously awaiting all the good times ahead. So I'm diving into the bookshelf and starting to envision those cool, crisp October days myself.
Increasing the adrenaline by reading it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hyping yourself up.
Yep, indeed. And to that point, like we were kind of talking about, there's any number of things to occupy your time with, including listening to podcasts, whether you're driving or mowing the lawn, or there's YouTube and there's all kinds of stuff. But I'm trying to at least dedicate some time every day to reading books, because I do appreciate the digital disconnect from time to time. As much as I am a consumer of many podcasts, business related, all kinds of stuff. I like being able to kind of go out and find really anything you want to listen to or learn about. That's kind of a driver for me, but I like to at least maintain a healthy dose of kind of that longer form written word stuff, really content that was created. They wouldn't have called it content back then, but stuff that was created before this digital age, because I just think there's a level of difference to it, the thought process that went into that sort of stuff, where today it's so easy you and I can jump on and talk for an hour and hopefully listeners walk away with an insight or two, but it's a different world that we're creating this stuff in than were those books.
Too fast paced a lot of the time, I think.
And seemingly getting faster every day with some of the stuff going on with AI and all that.
And I'm an ex-IT guy, so I don't mind. I'm very techie in many regards, but there's things I detest, like text messaging.
Yeah.
It just takes too much time. I have other things to do to sit instead of sitting there in front of my phone, staring at it.
You obviously grew up in an era before all this. I did kind of. I'm an older millennial, so I got my first basic cell phone when I was 16 years old, but I didn't have a smartphone until I was almost, like, the first iPhone I was almost graduated with college at that point. And it's strange, and this is common conversation, I feel like, in some of the stuff I listen to. It's strange to think about younger kids growing up with all of that access to information and everything on YouTube, and it's just a completely different world. So yeah, it just crept up on us, really.
I remember the first Motorola Droid came out. We bought it at the law firm immediately. I had it in my hands within a week of them coming out, looking at it to see if we were going to use it at the firm, which
you were
we
on
did.
The cutting edge.
I tend to be that way.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty good segue. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, Mark, as it relates to bird dogs and upland hunting and all the things we talk about here?
Well, I'm as they say, an adult-onset hunter. I did not own a dog until I was 46, and my now ex-wife wanted one for years, and I said, no time. Finally, I said, okay, we have the time now, but I had never hunted. I said, I would like to try bird hunting. I wanted a pointing dog because to me, that's the classic manner of hunting upland game. And I wanted a small breed. Turned out I worked with the wife of a breeder in Minnesota, and they bred Epagneul Bretons, EB, sadly called French Brittany, which I don't like, but whatever. And so I ended up getting one from him. And at 4 months of age, we knew Vern was an exceptional dog, and it just went from there. At one time, Vern was the most famous dog of the breed in the U.S. He was the first American-bred dog to our knowledge to win in field competition in France, and he beat the #1 French dog that year. He was the first dog in UKC pointing dog history to get any of their open class titles, and he was the first dog to get each and every one of the 4 titles that they had. He was an AKC Master Hunter. And then where do you go from there? I went over to France. I bought a female, bred her to him, ended up with a dog by the name of Darius, and it just slowly went from there. I decided when I retired that that's what I wanted to do. So I just went down that path. I had 5 dogs. The law firm decided that I made too much money and outsourced me. So I picked up and moved to North Dakota. And that was a little over 15 years ago.
Okay.
And that's what I've been doing since.
Wow.
I don't compete in trials and hunt tests as much as I used to. I have to travel a lot more than to do it.
Sure.
Minnesota, there was one within easy driving distance every weekend from mid-April through Memorial Day weekend. So it was just much easier to do. Now I'm down to, I only own 9 dogs. I had as many as 15 at one time. The most I ever took hunting, counting adults and puppies, was 25.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, it occupies your time.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah. So, yeah, the age of 46, that's an interesting one, right? Like, you adult onset hunter, you told me that. What was your exposure and interest level in hunting, specifically bird hunting, bird dogs, prior to that? And really what tipped the scales? You alluded to it a little bit, but
nothing. I mean, literally nothing. No exposure, no knowledge, nothing. I've always been kind of, somebody that likes to be outside doing stuff, camped and that kind of stuff. And it just seemed like a good way to get out and, be outside more and enjoy the weather. So I honestly don't know what really made me decide to do that, other than, well, I'm getting a dog. I want it to be able to do something.
Yeah. I mean, dogs are, they do have that effect on folks. We've all heard the stories of somebody that got a hunting breed with no intention of hunting, and then that kind of turns the tide. You obviously were a little bit more intentional about it, but the dog element to bird hunting kind of takes things to another level in a lot of ways.
Yep. And for me, and I would say a lot of people, that have dogs, it's not about shooting the bird. I mean, yeah. I agree. At one time it was. Honestly, if I shot 2 birds in a year, I'd be happy. I love watching the dogs just coursing through the fields. Half the time, if I'm hunting with somebody else, I carry a camera. I don't carry a gun. I'd rather take pictures than shoot birds.
So in retrospect, how much of a coincidence was it that, you landed on EBs and just basically through this friend of a friend, and now that's kind of like written your whole story here. You've landed on EBs, and it doesn't sound like you've ever changed. I mean, how fortuitous was that at the time?
I would say very. They're a very friendly breed. Brittany's in general are. I think these dogs are even more family oriented. I got lucky with a dog that was very easy to train. It took 3 1-hour sessions to have him broke, where he would steady to release, 3 sessions. And it was just so much fun to watch him. I really probably got hooked when I took him to his first hunt test. And they had never even seen one in Minnesota. People came up to me and asked, what breed of dog is that? And at that time, everybody called him French Brittany, so I did too. And I said, what he was. He was in the 4th race, so there was a total of 8 dogs to run at that point. He was the only one to find any birds, and he found 4. And, it was an AKC, it was a junior hunt test. And at that point, I just said, okay, I've got something, and just continued on. I did it because I thought he was an exceptional dog. The breeder did too. But how do you really know until you go, compare them against other dogs, and to me, that's the purpose of hunt tests and field trials. You know what you have. Not only that, it tells you where you're weak, where does the dog need more work, and just take it from there.
Yeah, that was really going to be my next question, just because as somebody that, gets their first bird dog, you don't have a ton of experience, obviously my assumption was you were working with the breeder and kind of talking to him, and how did you identify that you actually had something? And then, what was the decision like to say, I'm going to go from not having a bird dog to I'm kind of interested in this to, okay, I'm going to take this dog over to France and try to compete. How did that come together?
At 4 months old, I had taken him to the breeder to put him in the field on a bird. He'd already been introduced to birds, but it was just, throw a chucker out there, let him chase it around. He was gun conditioned at that point as well. So at 4 months old, the breeder put a bird out for him, a quail. He ran the field. He found it. He went on point. He stayed on point, broke on flush. We shot the bird and he retrieved it to hand. Then he continued to run and found a bird that breeder didn't even know was out there. He didn't think there was any more birds out there. He just goes, "You've got something here." And it just went from there. Before I went to France, Vern was just over 2 years old at that point. And I ran in the French Brittany Nationals in Georgia. And it was the first ever time they had an open class trial, which is a dog that's 100% steady, retrieves the hand. And he ended up taking second place. And part of that was the judge, who was from France, an ex-president of the national club in France, tripped and fell and hurt himself and ended up cutting the run short. So he only had one opportunity for a bird. The dog that beat him had a couple of birds. So I think that was the deciding factor. But I thought, okay, we did well. So I looked for another trial, found one in Kentucky about 2 months later. We went to that. There was 2 trials over a weekend. He won both of them. That gave him his first 2 titles by winning both. UKC has trialer, which is you have to win 1 trial or 2 second places and have 2 passes, which would be equivalent to an AKC hunt test,
okay.
The requirements. Then they had a title called champion trialer, and that was you had to win another trial at that point. Well, he had 1 pass with the second place, and then he won the next 2 trials, which qualified him for trialer and champion trial. So I thought, what the heck? And went to Montana for a wild bird trial, which was a requirement to get the champion of the field title. And the first day, I forgot about altitude issues for me, because I've had altitude issues. And I was talking to somebody there and said, yeah, dogs can take a little bit to adapt. Well, the first trial, no dog won, no dog found birds. And he was quartering behind me at the end of it because he was just wiped. And went to dinner that night. The next morning, went out. And this was in April 10th or something like that, just before they closed the season for wild birds running on public land. So the birds were in, nesting mode. So it means not much scent. And in about the last minute or two, he's going and he turned around, slammed on point, and we flushed a hen, of all things. And stayed through, fired the blank gun because you don't shoot wild birds in trials, obviously. And he ended up winning and getting the champion field trial, which was first dog of any breed. At that point, I contacted the vice president of UKC, Todd Kellum, and said, well, I guess I'm done. He was not even 2 at that point. And so I said, I'm done. They decided to add an additional trial, which he ended up being the first dog of that. And then I went to France in the fall and ran a number of trials. And he got like a 4th, a third, I think, a second, and a first.
Okay.
And just went from there. Just at that point, what else are you going to do? You got to get more dogs.
Yeah, you just kind of kept looking for the next challenge.
Yep.
Wow.
So I went over to France and bought one the next year.
Okay.
And
then
she wasn't really a field dog, but
yeah.
I mean, she was confirmation. She was excellent. So
okay. So were all those events kind of in Vern's first couple? Those are all French Brittany EB specific events.
Yep. The trials in France were not. There are some that are EB only, but there's also ones that are open to all continental breeds. And in Europe, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the English breeds never run against the continental breeds, ever. They're not expected to run the same.
Okay, so you're not going up against pointers and setters. It's continental breeds.
Because they run much bigger.
Yeah.
You know, these dogs, Vern, and I've had probably 4 or 5 others at least that are a good quarter-mile dogs, and but a pointer's expected to run much bigger and setter much bigger than that. So they never run against the same one. Here we do. And to me, that's how we ended up with an American Brittany. We had to change the dogs to make them competitive.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you have you been back to France since then?
No, I wanted to. I had a judge that I ran in a fall trial over there, which is liberated birds. They put pheasants out.
Okay.
And they're on like sugar beet fields. So you can easily see the dog. They don't run in cover that you can't see dogs like often we do here. And I had a judge tell me, you really need to bring him back over for the spring trials because there are wild bird trials. Unfortunately, it just never worked out that way. I was concentrated more on the UKC trials and AKC trials instead of doing that. And hindsight being what it is, I wish that I had done that, but wishing doesn't get me anywhere.
Yeah, it's hard as we try.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I have a dog that I have a young puppy. I'm hoping that he may be good enough to do it, but it's hard, when your first dog ends up being exceptional and whatnot, that, to a point you almost have no place to go but down, at least for a while.
The things that Vern did, obviously a very accomplished dog and very lucky to sort of be your first dog. Have you seen, because I always wonder this, I know you've listened to the show before, so you probably heard me talk about, I have 2 dogs. Really, I've learned a lot in 11 years, but my sample size is so small that I always wonder, what am I going to think of Rose, 30 years from now, hopefully, if I'm still doing this and still hunting dogs. And have you had other dogs that, like what sets Vern apart? Was it that he did so many things so well? Have you had other dogs that, man, that's about as good of a bird finder as Vern was, but he or she doesn't do this? How does Vern compare to other dogs with this, track record of experience you've got now?
He was above the majority of them, without a doubt.
In many aspects, I'm gathering.
Yeah, just bit ability, bird finding. I mean, just manners. I had a dog that had the potential. The first breeding from Artois, who's the one I went over to France and got, I kept a puppy out of that by the name of Darius. And I'll be honest, I kind of screwed him up. He was very, very talented, and I put too much pressure on him at a young age. And I realized that when I was hunting wild birds in Montana, where he would go on point and then his head would come over and look at me, and just I kept asking me, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? And I thought, oh, crap. Yeah. I put too much pressure on him. He ended up being a champion in the field in UKC. His problem was he was trial wise. He knew when he was in a trial, you train, he's not going to make a mistake, period. Just wouldn't make a mistake. Trial, well, I can remember one where he goes on point and a rabbit flushes out and he chases after it, which happens in Europe too. And you're allowed to call him one time to come off it.
Okay.
Well, he didn't. He came back about 5 or 7 minutes later with the rabbit.
Wow.
At that point, he's done. And I remember another one where I'm up on the side of a bowl I see him catch scent of a bird, and he didn't slow down. He sped up to get the bird. So I knew at that point, I go, you know what? He knows what's going on, and he knows that there's no recourse for whatever he does. He can do what he wants. So I just ended his career at that point because, like I said, training and hunting, he was fine. In trials, he knew it. There's a lot more people out there. There can be horses.
Sure. Yeah. There's plenty of associations. Yeah.
Yep. And somebody else imported a dog from Spain that I bought when he was 9, Hobble, and he was an exceptional dog as well. I never competed him because I got him when he was 9.
Okay. Yeah.
But he produced 27 litters, I think,
Wow.
at the end of the day. Most of them weren't for me. Vern produced 67.
Holy cow.
Yeah. He was a sought after dog. And I've got a dog right now that if I can ever get him to back reliably, because I bought him back from the owner because the owner felt he wasn't doing him justice. So gave me the opportunity to buy him back. And he never really hunted with another dog, so his backing was terrible.
Yep.
But Otis has the potential to be probably as good and maybe better as Vern, if I can get the backing down. Yeah, he's a more exciting dog to watch because he's just so full. He just loves what he's doing. You'll see him running flat out, and then he'll just bound up in the air a little bit and come back down and continue on. He's just a happy dog. So,
like he's just out there having fun. Yeah.
Yeah. But, will I ever get a dog that's as accomplished as Vern again? Honestly, I doubt it.
Like
not
odds
gonna say it
are
can't happen.
against you, but yeah, it could happen.
Yeah. You just keep trying. And most of the dogs that I own right now, I've got one from France, one from Spain, and then I believe all the others are ones that I've produced. So, keep plugging away at it and see what happens.
Right. You still enjoy it, obviously, and the dogs do, and yeah, that's interesting. I've interviewed a couple of EB folks over the years. It's been a while.
Mike Sheffer.
Yeah, Mike. I was going to ask if you knew Mike because he and I text
I met Mike once.
Okay,
I've met him once.
I was curious about what is the world of EBs going back from 20 years ago to now. They're not going to make the top 5 list of breeds as far as like volume, I don't think. But is the EB world very much growing? What was it like back then, and what do you see now?
It has exploded, and I would argue to the detriment of the breed. They're back when I started with it, they're really well. You go to gun dog breeders and look at the breeders, okay? And back when I started, you might see maybe 10. Now it's like 125, and the vast majority of them, I don't necessarily like the term backyard breeder because that's what I was when I started.
Right.
So it sounds not very good, but that's, everybody starts somewhere.
It can be used in a derogative way, but I take your meaning.
Yeah. So it has exploded. The quality of the dogs, I don't know if it's as good as it was. I think it's starting to get better. I've got some friends that, breed as well and have been successful in AKC field trials, very successful. There are good dogs out there. There's a gentleman in Massachusetts, actually it's one of my dogs, that Parker is actually working towards his dual champion now. So he's in the show ring, which is very unusual for a French Brittany in the AKC world. But he got his field champion last year, and he did it at a regional field trial, which he won. So he's got an RFC title as well. And last year, he was the #1 amateur walking Brittany in the Northeast. So obviously, there are good dogs. There's a dog out there by the name of Atos that has done exceptionally well. There's a dog by the name of Nalco out there that has done exceptionally well. So there are really strong dogs out there, but there's a lot of very mediocre, for lack of a better description.
And you could probably say that about any breed too. It's just in some of the smaller pools, it gets magnified a little bit, but
yeah, I think that's part of it. I judge dogs in UKC as well. So I don't judge very much anymore, but I have the opportunity to see lots of dogs. And too many people, I would say breeders, have advertised these dogs as for the foot hunter.
Yeah.
Not understanding that a dog a quarter mile away you can walk to and still shoot the bird. And so there's a lot of 50-yard dogs out there, and that's what they're breeding for. A lot of dogs for 30 yards, and they'll say, I don't want a dog that's, that far out. It's out of control. Well, that's a training issue. You go to Europe and these dogs are not 50-yard dogs. These dogs, they quarter, that's what they expect there, but they're 150 to 200 yards to either side of you. They're just passing in front of you. They're not close working dogs per se. So I think because of that misconception, people are breeding towards the wrong thing. In Europe, the primary thing they judge is race. In other words, how are they attacking the field? That's the first thing. Manners is for the most part, training. Race is not, The number one thing a pointing dog has to want to do is find a bird.
Yeah. Would you say that when you say the term race, I think I know what you mean. I haven't heard that as much. Would you say that's the same as drive, essentially?
Yes. Yeah. They call it the race in the field.
Sure.
Yep. So, but yeah, it's desire would be a better word even.
Yep. I like that term.
They have to have the desire to find a bird.
Yep.
If they don't have that desire, they don't find a bird. They don't find a bird, they can't point it. They don't point it, you can't shoot it. You can't shoot it, you can't retrieve.
Yeah.
So the number one thing they have to have above and beyond all of it is desire. I get a lot of people that the first thing that they're concerned about and ask about is retrieve. Well, yeah, okay, but it's the last thing really that you should be worried about, because if you don't have the rest of it, retrieve is never going to come into play.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of maybe a dumb question here, but I don't want to breeze over this, and I like to try to remind myself to ask questions that maybe somebody would not know the first idea. A French Brittany, what does it take to be considered a French Brittany? Do the lines have to tie back to France? Like, what is the distinction in today's day and age?
Does not have to tie back to France. And this dog that might become a dual champion, we thought might be the first one, until a friend of his who has had a successful dog, pointed out the American Brittany Club's page of dual champions, which is like 700 some dogs. Well, the first 10 dogs were all French bred. They're all, came from France or, out of those lines. And then it diverged. Realistically, they need to either come from Europe or they need to be registered UKC, because UKC recognizes the Epagneul Breton as a distinct breed from the Brittany.
Okay.
AKC does not, although they've talked about splitting it, which will be a nightmare to do, because you have dogs that are mixes. What do you do with those dogs?
Right. Yeah, you risk creating this gray zone, sort of.
Yeah. And the problem I have with it is, like, Atos, the dog I mentioned, has run in the American Brittany Nationals, and it has taken fourth place in that trial 2 or 3 times. So we would no longer be able to compete in that venue if they split the breed. So we're kind of not necessarily wanting the split, but I can understand maybe why it should happen. Plus, EBs can have black in the coat. American Brittany's cannot.
Okay.
And I know why. When the breed was established in the U.S., in France, they couldn't be black either. The original breed standard didn't call for it. But they were always being produced. And in like 56 or 57, the French changed the breed standard to allow black. We did not change it here. So black is not allowed. And you can't have a black nose to go in the ring. Parker's going in the ring, but he carries 2 copies of the liver gene, which produces a lighter colored nose and slightly lighter colored eyes. So,
all right. So if somebody, I'm going to try to rephrase it. That was a helpful answer. But if somebody said, okay, I think I want a Brittany, but I'm not sure if I should get American or French. what would your response be like? How would you separate them, and how would you steer them towards one or the other, if you would at all?
I probably wouldn't. To me, I mean, I have nothing against American Brittanys by any stretch of the imagination. Are they the same anymore? I guess the main thing I would ask is, do you want to do show in the AKC? If that's the case, then yes, absolutely get an American Brittany, because they can. But if you don't care, 6 of one, half does the other. The only thing I would be careful with is some of the field lines. Well, the field people, as a general rule, don't necessarily care about standard.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're getting dogs that are too big. You're getting dogs with, too much white on them, like white on the ear, white on the eye, which in EBs, that's a breed disqualification. You can't have that. So you have to be a little bit careful in that regards. But as far as temperament and hunting ability, no. Either one, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a hunting dog, bird dog, you could find one in either. Then it comes back to more, find the breeder that you like, find the breeder that sort of is doing the things that you see yourself doing, all that sort of stuff.
Always go see the dogs if you can. There's times where you can't. I have 4 in Hawaii. They didn't come. One gentleman has 3. And they can't come over to see the dogs first.
Are they hunting dogs in Hawaii, like chase pheasants and that kind of stuff?
The one I'm not sure of. The gentleman that has the 3 of them is breeding the dogs, and absolutely, melanistic pheasants are primarily what he gets. And I think he's got Franklins, both gray and black, and Urkels where he is. He's on Maui.
I've never hunted there. I've only been there one time on vacation, but it's been a while. But over the years, I have had a few people write in, whether that they live there, hunt there, or even just suggest, hey, you should do an interview on upland hunting in Hawaii. So I do know that it exists, and yeah, they have some unique game related stuff, with some of the access deer and some of the weird things that they have over there with no predators and all that stuff.
Well, if you ever have the desire, Brad, I could probably get you in contact with him, and he's also a big game hunter as well.
Yeah.
He took the Maui Little League team to the World Series, and I think they took like 2nd or 3rd in the Little League World Series one year. Yeah. So he's a very good guy. And, like I said, I could probably get you in contact with him if you ever had the desire to find out more about, or if you ever had the desire to hunt there.
Yeah. That'd be a fun conversation to have when it's February and you and I are freezing our butts off. I'd call somebody in Hawaii and talk to them.
Well, I was going to go over because he was going to take care of, I basically had to pay for a hunting license and the flight, and everything else would be taken care of. And it was pretty much set that I was going to go over. Unfortunately, that was the year Vern died in the fall, and that just sucked all the wind out of me. So I never ended up going.
Oh man, we're already 40 minutes in here. This has been
I see that
entertaining, but I want to bring it back a little bit to, we haven't even really stated there was a little bit of a spark to this conversation today. You reached out to me and were telling me about you had listened to something or read something about started dogs versus puppies. And that's a common thing that comes up. And I think a lot of people get very excited about the idea of having a puppy. I certainly did for my first bird dog. I mean, there was like not a second thought I was getting a puppy just because I wanted to start from day one. But now, being in and around this stuff long enough, I've talked to many people at different phases of their life and different interests, and can see some of the avenues that somebody would find themselves considering a started dog. So I'll kind of tee you up, Mark, and just whatever's kind of on your mind as far as like maybe what are some of the misconceptions, and maybe define what a started dog is, and then we'll go from there.
Well, defining what a started dog is depends. And that depends on the person you're talking to. But I think that there's some things that it should absolutely have. First off, gun conditioned. And that in of itself is often a reason why I get a dog in the start, because people are worried about screwing that up. Introduction to birds. Well, most people don't have access to a quail or a chucker to introduce them to a bird the first time. or homing pigeons, which I have as well, to work on point. They don't have access to large tracts of land to let the dog run to what its potential is. Now, obviously, in where you hunt, the woods, they're not going to be as big a running, because they can't. You're not going to see that many birds if they are. But where I am, I can take them out, and North Dakota, depending on where you are and the cover that year, if you could see them 5 miles away, you would be able to, because there's just nothing blocking that. So there's just things that people can't do as a result. So, which is a reason to get a started dog. I'll have litters where puppies, they don't leave till 6 months old because they leave as started dogs. One of the misconceptions that I heard, and it was a podcast, was bonding. Okay. A puppy's going to bond better with you. I think that that's absolutely wrong. I got Hobble at 9 years of age. He was extremely bonded to me. I mean, I couldn't go anywhere, and he was coming with me. Molly, who I have right now, Roma, who I have right now. I think a dog will bond with you at any age if you treat it right, and that's the main thing. So I think that's a misconception. The gentleman on the podcast also said that they were kennel dogs. Maybe yes, maybe no. A lot of them are not kennel dogs. And in my case, before I send them out, I housebreak them. A 6-month-old, I won't guarantee is absolutely housebroke, but an older dog. And I don't think it's that difficult to housebreak an older dog. Hobble was a kennel dog until he was 9 years old, and he housebroke very easily. Molly, I'm not sure. Roma was the same way, was a kennel dog. It's a process. And if you follow it, it's not that hard to do. And with an older dog, it's much easier. What a started dog is not, I would say, is a really good retriever. Like I said earlier, there's too much else that they have to do. The number one thing I want them to do is run the field. To be a started dog, they have to run the field age appropriately. Then you have to remind yourself when you get the dog that the word is started. It doesn't mean that they're going to go on point and stay on point or anything. It might only be like 3 seconds. Generally, a started dog has not had exposure to wild birds, or if you don't have that ability to a game farm. They've started the path, and that's really it. And, the difference between a puppy and an older started dog is simply age. You can start a dog at any age. It doesn't matter. The old saying, when does a dog stop learning? The day they die. They're learning all the time. And, will they be as good? Maybe not. But I think a started dog going back to range, they have to range. Because if they don't, then what do you have? You don't want a bootlicker. And it's the old saying, it's easier to pull a rope in than it is to push a rope out. So I want them to go out as far as possible. And so I tend to run any dog that's going to be started with an older dog, providing that they're old enough that they can keep up with them. And it fires up the competitive juices. A puppy doesn't have most of that because simply they're too young to train. Now, the gun conditioning can certainly be done. I often start them that at 6 weeks of age, and as well as bird introduction, because I'll take a quail, pull the flight feathers on one wing so it can't fly off. And there's nothing like watching 6 to 8 puppies chase after a bird, all trying to get it. And what I want is one of them to grab it and run off to the next county because that's their bird and they're not going to let it up. But I only do that one time ever. And then start tossing homing pigeons, at which point now I can start gun conditioning.
It's almost apples to oranges, really, because, a puppy, you could pretty easily kind of we've what comes to mind is an 8-week-old puppy, a 6, 7, 8-week-old puppy. Whereas a started dog in air quotes, that's such a much more broad. It really depends. A started dog could be 6 months old, or a started dog could be 5 years old, probably, right? And then it's all, what characteristics or what training experience does that individual started dog have? So to your point, it's kind of what the person means by a started dog is a big difference.
Yeah. And, a lot of the reason people want started dogs is, you, okay. Now you're a little bit different case, but you work full time. You have young children. You have a wife. Do you know what they call it when all that stuff is going on?
No.
Life.
Oh yeah.
Life.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So you just don't
I'm right in the thick of it.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't necessarily have the time to be able to do it. Like I said, I didn't start doing dogs until I was 46 because I didn't feel that I had the time to do it. Now, if I had known about things like started dogs at the time, maybe I would have. I don't know because, to actually hunt them would have been difficult for the same reason. Just don't have time. So a lot of people don't have the time, or they don't know how to do these things. To a point, it's not rocket science. You can learn how to do it. I knew nothing, 20 some years ago when I got Vern. I knew nothing about what I do now. I was an IT professional. Ask me about servers, routers, firewalls. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can speak to you intelligently about that. Starting a dog. What is that? But the average person has the ability to learn, but it can be intimidating because you don't want to make mistakes.
Yep.
The problem with not wanting to make mistakes is that's how you learn. You don't want to screw up the dog, but you will make mistakes, as I'm sure you probably are aware of.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. And even now, another thing is equipment. Okay. Realistically, if you're using homing pigeons, you got to have an automatic launcher, right? Well, they're not cheap. And how often are you really going to use it? I listened to the podcast with Dell that you just had, and you were talking about that with him as well. So, where you live, maybe you can have homing pigeons. I don't know.
I could, but it's not, in my eyes, it's not ideal. In fact, I did another interview last week that hasn't aired yet, but folks will have likely heard it before they hear this one, where we talked quite a bit about dog training, pigeons, backyard bird dog training, that kind of stuff. Yeah, very much so.
I'm surrounded by corn, wheat, soybeans.
Do you have acreage, or are you just kind of in the middle of a bunch of?
I don't want acreage.
Okay, yeah.
I have 1 3/4 acres, so I have a fenced-in area about an acre for the dogs to be able to just get out and run around and be dogs. But to train a dog, and I'm not a rough grouse hunter. When I was in Minnesota, I hunted rough grouse and woodcock, and I've shot doubles on them. I've shot them left-handed back in the days where I was shooting left-handed. So, but it's not what I enjoy. I like the big wide open areas, and that's what is surrounding me.
Yeah.
Big wide open areas to be able to do that. But how far do most people have to drive to either get in the woods like where you can, or get into areas where they can run the dogs?
Yeah.
Off lead and let them really go. The thing I forgot about started dog is e-collar condition to come to light stimulation. The silent command system. I've been to all 3 seminars with Rick Smith. I've had the opportunity to sit at dinner for hours over bottles of wine about dog training and everything else in life. He's a great guy. I was disappointed to hear that was his final remote one that he was going to be doing. He's a fantastic guy. I've met Delmar. I have not met Ronnie, but same family guy. I assume he's a good guy. So, but most people don't, they don't have the opportunity because of time to go to a seminar like that to learn how to do it under somebody's tutelage that is, I don't know how you get much more experience than the Smiths. Or the other one is George Hickok's. I've been to his seminar. You know, most people just can't do it. So a started dog is a good idea for them. Unfortunately, it costs more.
It costs more like on paper, but when you think about time and everything, you know, you can start making that add up.
I get $1,000 more for a started puppy as I do for a 8-week-old puppy. When you consider shots, I microchip everything regardless, but housebreaking them, the opportunity that they have in the field, you know, I have them for 4 months additional. Well, I don't charge the full 4 months of training because I can't train every single day and every single thing. E-collar conditioning doesn't start until 5 months old.
Your started dogs, I'm gathering that effectively starts at a 6-month-old dog, give or take.
You know, I might let one go a little bit earlier. I would hesitate to. It depends on, is it doing everything it should be? But the fact that I don't start e-collar conditioning until 5 months old, and, you know, that's a couple-week process if you're going to do it right. You know, it's unlikely. I've never had one go. It may go longer depending on the individual, you know, if they have time constraints where they, you know, they can get out and get it. But I generally don't charge anymore. If it's another month or two, so be it. You know, I'm not that concerned about it. Otherwise, to come in to start, I would recommend not doing it until the puppy's 6 months old. Because at 6 months old, I think they're really ready to start taking some training. But it's not the intensive stuff, you know, the wool breaking. No, it's all, you know, the gun conditioning, the e-collar conditioning, introduction to birds, running the field. And as a general rule, a dog at that age can be started in about a month. You can get that stuff done. The thing I can't do in that time frame is like housework, you know, housebreaking them. For me, a started dog, I don't use a leash on them at all.
So no healing. Yeah.
No, I don't want an overly obedient dog at that age because that's what they'll be when they're older. I took in a dog from a gentleman that because it wouldn't hunt. That dog would only heel. He lived in a city, is always on lead. That's what that dog learned. Now, I had it hunting at the end of the month where it would range out 100 yards or so. As soon as he got back home, it went right back to what it was because it's now back in its environment that it learned to do that in. So I'm not a big one on that. I don't teach a dog to sit ever. You know, if they sit, hey, great. But if you're going to compete, you know, you sit in a trial, walk over to your dog, put the leash on, thank the judge, and walk out of the field.
Yeah.
And a dog, you watch a dog that's under pressure, what do? Often they sit.
Reflex, yeah.
Exactly. And what is pointing stressful? Yes. So, you know, that's the theory behind it. Plenty of people teach them to sit and never have an issue. Right. It's, you know, it's just philosophy at that point.
Yeah.
And like I said, I really don't do any retrieving work. I used to force fetch dogs. I don't anymore. I did not enjoy the process, much less the dog really enjoy the process. I don't use dummies for, you know, it's if I'm doing retrieving work with one of mine once a little bit older, it's a fresh kill bird or a thawed out bird. I don't use dummies. I've had plenty of dogs where, like Vern, throw a dummy, and he was horse fetched. Throw a dummy, he'll run over to it, go, it's a dummy, and come back without it.
Yep.
Throw a bird, and he is all over it. You know, so person you're looking at getting a started dog from, you need to talk to them and find out exactly what they mean by started, because it would be nice if it was consistent, but it's not. And they may call, like a friend of mine calls them green broke. You know, to me, that is not the case. That's a dog that's going through wool training. So they may call it something else, but, you know, talk to them, go out and see the dog. Is it doing what you want? But I also emphasize to people, yes, this dog is pointing, and Like I've got a almost 1-year-old that's pointing really well right now, but he hasn't hunted. Do I know what he's going to do on wild birds? Heck no. No idea. It's not a contrived situation, which is what training is. I fully expect for him to completely blow up. And for me, that first hunting season, they bust and chase every bird. I don't care. Because what's the number one thing? Drive.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see.
Bird finding and excited to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then after that first hunting season, then you step up into the next level, which I don't know a good name for it. It's not finished. It's halfway in between. I thought, well,
intermediate,
started,
next
finished,
level,
intermediate, but I just don't like the term intermediate. But that's the average hunting dog is at that level. They go on point, they stay on point until the bird flushes. They'll retrieve it within a couple of steps usually, or they'll go over and stand on the bird, so they can't get away. May or may not back, but that's after the first hunting season. And a dog like that, here again, the first thing I would ask if I found a dog like that was for sale is, what's wrong?
Yeah. Why are you moving on from him? Yeah.
Then you go to the finished dog, which is basically like an AKC master hunter. Stays on point till you tell it to go, retrieves the hand, backs on its own until that other dog retrieves the bird, and you never say a word to the dog. But how many people can hunt a dog like that? And how many people can keep a dog at that
maintain that level? Yeah.
Because it takes work. You
much easier said than done.
Yeah. I mean, here again, it's like starting a dog to a point. You have to have access to birds. You have to have access to ground. You have to have access to other dogs when you're talking pointing or backing. It takes a lot of work to get them to that level, and it takes almost as much work to keep them at that level, if not more work, because it's going on for a longer period of time.
Yeah, and it's higher standards that you're holding them to and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can give you reasons why you want a dog that's 100% steady.
Oh.
Because that dog's not going to get shot. Very, very, very unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Secondly, you shoot a bird and it's a cripple and it flies quite a ways. The dog that's running through the grass after that bird, or the dog that's standing and watching that bird, which one's more likely to know where it is? It has marked that bird better. I mean, I've seen plenty. They stand up on their hind legs, to get up a little over the grass so they can watch.
Keep a visual on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, to me, that there's 4 levels of dog, and that's it. Like I said, the average person wants probably an intermediate or just a hunting dog. They don't need anything else. And, they if they had something else, they can't really maintain it anymore. It's frustrating to finish a dog and then have it come back a year later, and all that work has been undone. I would probably tell you, that's fine, but I won't take it back again, because you're just throwing money away.
Right. Yeah. Think about taking an honest look in the mirror and think about what is it that you really want and are committed to at that point.
No, I guess I can understand. I had a gentleman in Connecticut that used to fly his dog out for me to train, and it's a pup he got from me. But he did it because he was going on vacation at the same time. So yeah, what the heck? Why not?
Yeah. There's always scenarios, right?
Yeah. The exception to the rule.
Yeah. But the way you describe that, it's, I don't consider like my setup here where I live, where my property and stuff. It's not the ideal setting. Like if I was to start from scratch a white paper and draw it up, I probably would have 5 acres. I maybe would be on the outskirts of town, that sort of thing. And my situation is good enough where I feel comfortable. I'm able to get my dogs in the woods enough, off leash, on wild birds, to kind of develop them to the point that, at least at this point in my life, I'm happy with. But I could totally understand if I was in a situation where if I was really committed to this hunting game the way that I am now, but I did live in a bigger city, and I was acknowledging, hey, I've got 2 young boys, I got a wife, family, all this sort of stuff. I could very easily see myself in a position where probably not dog number 1 or dog number 2, but where I'm at now, I could see myself thinking, yeah, maybe I do want the gun intro, the bird intro, some of that early development stuff. Maybe I just want that done, and could see myself getting a 6-month-old dog or a 1-year-old dog. I could, it's not out of reach for me, I guess, but makes sense.
And something I didn't think about I thought about when you said gun, I didn't think about before. Are you allowed to fire a weapon where you are?
No. Like I could probably shoot a snap. I could shoot a snap cap probably, but
right.
I also would be wondering, like, am I going to get a call from the neighbors? Like I live in town.
Yeah. Well, and that makes a big difference. And, a blank gun is not a shotgun.
Right.
And so you have to, now you can go up the Pine Ridge and probably do that stuff.
Correct.
So you have that ability, but, a lot of people don't. And,
yes,
where I lived in Minnesota before I moved here, absolutely. No.
Yeah.
You're not firing a blank gun or anything. Yeah. I was in the burbs, but.
What part of Minneapolis did you live in, or outside?
Otsego.
Otsego. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to like Kelly Farms or anything like that?
I was just going to bring that up.
Okay.
Didn't go to Kelly Farms very often.
Okay.
But have you heard of Forbrooks?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. 40 minutes away. I was up there 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah. Okay.
And then on the way up there was, what was the name of it? Oak Ridge, maybe? Pheasants. It was a pheasant farm.
Oh.
They produce like 1 million. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, there's I'm blanking on it too. There's probably a few of them.
Right by Malacca.
Yeah.
So, and they used to do chuckers as well.
Okay.
And so you could get their breeding hens that were done for really cheap. So I don't think there's probably such a thing anymore, but, talking 20 years ago, I think I was paying like maybe $7 for a hen, and I hate to think how much they probably are now.
Did you ever get under the highway overpasses and net pigeons?
No. I did not.
That came up on last week's conversation.
Depending on where you live, the better solution, like where I am, that's all ag, find a farmer, and I posted on Facebook, found the farmer that had them in his grain bins. Go out there when it's completely black with a flashlight. You see where they are. You have a long stick. You knock them off their roost, turn the flashlight off. They can't see. They'll fly into the side of the bin and come down, just fall down basically to the ground. And then you just walk around and pick them up. Much easier. I tried trapping. No, I was never successful. John Ziegler? Do you know John Ziegler?
John Ziegler. No, at first I thought you were going to say John Zeman. Are you thinking of Zeman?
Zeman, you're right.
Okay,
you are correct.
Yeah.
I know John
When you
Ziegler
said Forbrooks, that's immediately who I thought, because I think they train there.
Yep. Yeah. And I used to get pigeons from John. So, and I wasn't allowed to have a pigeon coop where I was, even though I did.
Got it.
I was allowed to have 3 dogs where I lived. I had 5. But in the, I don't know how many years I lived there, I had one neighbor I had never talked to. I had other things. Nobody had any idea how many dogs I had. So it worked out well. But yeah, there's so much you have to start a dog.
When you're selling puppies, do your clients have the option to do puppy or started dog? You don't do them all started dogs or anything
Absolutely.
like
No, it's their choice. Because some, like you wanted that puppy experience. And I understand it, especially if you have young children. Okay. The kid, they're going to bond with a puppy. It's just but you get it, you get in the, well, my youngest is 45. So, for me to get a puppy now, for me, yes. Okay. But the average person, once they hit their 40s and the kids are out of the house, a started dog starts making more sense, especially if you have a wife that's a little reticent about getting a dog, and, marking in the house. And, like I said, I won't guarantee a 6-month-old. In fact, I probably wouldn't guarantee a 5-year-old coming into a new environment, because they'll almost always do it. And Another thing to keep in mind with a 6-month-old started or a little bit older dog that you get, started or however, is the rule of threes. 3 weeks or 3 days to de-stress, 3 weeks to get used to you, 3 months to completely settle in.
I like that.
It is amazing how accurate that is. I've had numerous people say it was almost to the day, So, a dog that, you come over and you see a dog in the house and they're pretty chill. And then they get to your house and they're just going amok. And you just go, what the hell did I just do? Well, take a 2 or 3-year-old child, which a dog has roughly the intelligence of, and take it from its environment and throw it into someplace where it doesn't know anything. New people, everything is different. How are they going to react? And a dog is the same way.
Living where you live in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota, do you do anything when you have pups or maybe beyond, maybe we were beyond the 8-week pup at this point, some of those started dogs, do you do anything like taking them places to get them exposed to things other than just sort of your middle of nowhere environment? Do you get into that?
I haven't too much, but on occasion, I'll take a puppy up to runnings, if I'm looking for or something like that, and people will come up and go, ooh, as far as environmental, well, I've got lawn, I've got tall grass, I've got a grove around my house, all the kind of stuff that they could encounter when they're older and hunting. I have that around my house. And as soon as they can start going outside, they go on puppy runs. We go through all that stuff. We go through puddles, and all that kind of stuff. Then if I go to a field trial, they go with, and they can run around and get used to the mass confusion. There's not a whole lot for me to take them to, like, someplace. Well, I doubt Mall of America would let you bring one in, but something like
not.
that.
Yeah.
Next weekend, I'm probably going to go to Game Fair.
Yeah.
And I'll probably take a young dog there. I'm surprised Upland Gun Company didn't have a booth there.
That is one. Typically, Jerry is there with the Eukanuba folks. We have not been there, but yeah, we kind of discuss it every year. It's just a time of year when we're sort of being pulled in different directions. But yeah, that's a big show.
Yeah, and so I have a Vici is.
Oh, I like that name.
Well, his registered name is Denny Vidi Vici.
Ah, nice. What does that mean again now? I've got that on
Julius Caesar.
Oh, okay.
When he went to, I don't know if it's Germany or England, and came back. I saw, I conquered.
That's right.
So he has a lot to live up to being called Vici.
Sure. Big shoes to fill, or big sandals to fill.
He has the potential to be an exceptional dog. A good friend of mine in Illinois that trains dogs, competes and whatnot. I gave him a puppy out of this litter, and he has subsequently told me, and I've been out there to see the puppy too, that he goes, this puppy has made me excited about this stuff again. And so I've got another one of the siblings here from some friends of mine in Wyoming that got one. So, in fact, I saw another one out of the litter that Clint was training in Illinois. So I've seen quite a few of them. And to me, it's an exciting litter. But Vici will probably come with me to that to get into that environment. He's been in the field trial environment, but just more. He's old enough. A young puppy at, say, 6 weeks old, maybe even 8 weeks old, I would never consider putting him into that environment. It is too chaotic. The stress level would be ridiculous.
I do remember when I had my first dog, that was something you read about, puppy socialization and that kind of stuff. And I almost felt, I didn't do anything like that, but I almost felt pressured to, like, oh gosh, I need to take them up to Home Depot or do this, which I feel like could be good advice. But to your point, you could overdo it too if the dog is too young and you bring them to too big of an environment. I now think about it, and you could, comment on this, but, exposing them to lots of different things in little doses is a good thing, but it's kind of like everything else, in moderation and within reason.
Absolutely. And one thing, and the exposure, which I didn't think about with the started dog that I do as well, is they're exposed to other dogs.
Yeah.
most dogs that I see are poorly socialized with other dogs. They don't know correct behavior. And I had that dog, Darius. He was an intact breeding male. A female comes and sticks its face in his face. Yeah. Neutered male came and stuck its face in his face. Yeah. An intact male came and stuck its face in his face. He'll teach it never to do it again. And it would be like me if I was where you are right now, coming and putting my face an inch or two away from you. Your hackles are going to go up. What the hell are you doing? I'm going to hit you. Dogs are the same way, especially an intact breeding male. And Darius was a dominant male to start with. And people all the time would let their dogs come up to him. A friend of mine did that while we were hunting, and we stopped, and he knew how Darius was. And he had big short hairs. I mean, big 80-pound short hairs. And one of his came and did that while we were stopped. And Darius taught him never to do that again. And he was mad at me because Darius did that. And I said, you know that Darius is going to do that. And you know that is incorrect behavior. That is not appropriate behavior for that dog to do. The same dog would also rip a bird in half trying to take it out of your dog's mouth.
Yeah.
So
since you brought that up, what is the appropriate way to do that? Not so much, it's like one thing to like throw a puppy with other dogs because the puppy can't really do anything. But what should you do? Say you're meeting up with your friend for the first time, and maybe you've got there's different, maybe you both have an intact male. What's the appropriate way to do that? Do you take them out both on leashes and let them introduce themselves? Like, I feel like that doesn't come up very often.
I would not have them on a leash.
Okay.
Because the dog is restrained.
Get tangled up and...
Well, no. How many times have you seen dogs on the opposite side of the fence growling and trying to get at each other and fight?
I've seen
and
fence aggression.
As soon as they're by each other,
yeah.
A leash is they're restrained, okay?
Yeah.
They feel threatened because they can't do what they know. They have no option for flight.
Yep.
They only have option for fight in that situation. So I would put them on the ground, not by each other, and let them come up to each other and just watch. If they go at each other, break them up. I wouldn't worry about it a whole lot because males fight for dominance. Now, if it's two females fight to kill. I have scar marks on my thighs from breaking up, mouth, literally a half mouth mark. Okay. I have looks like a dimple. Okay. That's breaking up. I had to get rid of 2 females because 2 different times I had a set of female that if they saw each other, the first one, they saw each other, they were going to charge and try and kill that dog. So just be careful about that. But I'm going to also tell you in the field, it's almost never an issue.
Right. Because they kind of have a job to do and they're busy doing. That's kind of what I've seen.
Yeah. And they have a wide open space. They can just avoid it. Now they may come up, and if one of them wasn't socialized properly, but just let them be around each other. Let them run around in a yard. Like I said, I have about an acre fenced in, so they can go out there and they can run around and they can choose whether they want to be by that dog or not. The only time I have fights is if I have like 3 or 4 males out and there's an area going into the kennel building that's much narrower. And if they jostle and bump one, then okay, the other dog may take offense and then I got to break them up. I've only been bit once ever breaking up males. So I don't worry about that. But just in a wide open area, preferably not on their home ground.
Right.
Because dogs are territorial. They understand terrain. So, take them out into the field and just let them out. Let them out. I did it all the time with Darius. Darius never cared unless that dog, did something it shouldn't. But it didn't happen that often in the field. It was more likely to happen in a smaller area.
Right. Yeah.
Don't do it in your house. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I guess maybe
find
that could
the area
be
and it's that dog's home turf.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just a bad idea.
Well, if there's any dog socialization, not that you didn't do a service here on the podcast, Mark, I appreciate that. But if there's anybody that is like a Caesar Milan, if he's out there listening, maybe I should get him on here at some point and talk through that. Because that is something that comes up, especially in the fall, hunting camps. We're meeting up with we made a new friend and we're going to go to a hunting camp and new environment. Maybe you get there at 8:00 at night, it's dark and you want to let your dog out because you've been on the road for 4 hours and you don't know what other dogs are around. I mean, that's when things happen. And I guess I don't really have like a list of like, okay, do this first, this, and this. And
I think that's a situation that you can't prepare for. How would you prepare for that? It's just, if it's dark out.
Yeah. It's almost like goes back to like your own situational awareness. If you're just showing up somewhere and you don't know whose dogs are off leash and out and about, maybe leave your dogs in the truck until you figure that out first.
The other important thing to do in regards to that, and it's not really self-evident to start with, but you are the alpha. Okay. You are in charge, and that will make a difference. Darius, another dog came after, did it. Darius would go after the dog. I would tell him, stop, get over here. And he would immediately. Okay. So, but a lot of people, the dog is the alpha, and, they treat them.
They may not know it, but the dog does, right?
Well, see how they treat their dogs,
Yeah.
The whole fur baby thing,
Yeah.
And you may be that way, but how does your wife have the dominance over the dogs the same as you do? In
Right.
your situation, I wouldn't be surprised that she does. How about the kids?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And as a result, that dog can get mixed messages. You'll come in, it's fine. Wife comes in, it's fine. The kids don't, no, probably not going to listen. So you have to be the leader of the pack too. So they understand that. So when you tell them no, I don't say no. I tell them or I tell them stop. That is important as well. And for a started dog, they know I'm in charge. When I get people here to pick up their dog, and one that comes to mind is the one from that I have from Wyoming right now. That's Beachy's sister. I met them a number of years ago with their first dog, and they subsequently, I gave them a female that was retired, and they bought a couple others from me over the years. And learning in the military, which I went through officer school, is called a command voice. When you tell your dog something, are you asking or are you telling? Here, you're asking them to come. Okay, here. That's the command. And it's the dogs don't necessarily understand words.
It's not just the word, it's everything else. Yeah.
It's tone, inflection and body language. Like if I'm trialing and I'm going to release the dog, I have them by the collar. I lean forward. My body is tensed up. I have point out, for them to go. And when I let go of the collar, I tap them on the back of the head and say in voice and go, let's go. Everything my body told them to go. My tone told them to go. The tap on the head told them to go. And in a trial or a hunt test, the most important part is probably the first 30 seconds where they take off. That sticks in your mind. But that's, it's anything you do with the dog. You tell them to come. You tell them to whoa. Frankly, that's all I ever teach my dogs. I don't have commands to turn because they do that automatically. In the woods, maybe, but I don't do that anymore. But if I have a dog a quarter mile away from me out in what I hunt, all I do is turn a different direction. They'll turn.
They'll see you.
Go ahead of me because they know they're supposed to be ahead of me, and they know their job, and they're supposed to keep contact with me. Their job is to pay attention to me, like mine is to pay attention to them, and that's just natural.
Yep.
I think Dell mentioned this in his podcast too. You stop in the field. What's the dog do? Comes back.
Comes to you. Yep. Yeah, he did bring that up.
Yep.
Or at least that was the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and most of them do, and you don't really teach them to do it. There's no command; they just do it because you're stopped. They're going to come back. What's going on? What do you want me to do? They're supposed to check in the field, okay? And that may be they're running by and their head just pops up a little bit, or their eyes move in one direction. Vern, Darius, Hobble, name others. They could be a quarter mile away, literally a quarter mile away. Vern would stop, turn around, and just look at me. If I told him something to do, he'd do it. If I didn't say anything, I just kept walking. He'd turn around and continue on hunting. It's all part of starting a dog in the field work, which, until I started talking about some of the stuff, I didn't realize, I do this with all the dogs.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a set thing that I'm going to tell somebody that I'm going to be working on this with your dog, because most of that is instinctual for them.
Yeah. Very cool. Mark, do you have a favorite bird to hunt?
Absolutely. Sharptail.
Ah, the sharp-tailed grouse.
Yep. Followed closely by partridge.
Okay.
I'm not a pheasant hunter.
Not a pheasant hunter,
but you must have plenty of pheasants. Give a damn about them. No.
No,
the predominant bird here is sharptail.
Okay.
Pheasants are probably 2. Partridge, we're starting to see more. 2 years ago, I saw a covey of about somewhere between 30 and 50.
Yeah.
There's a covey 2 miles down the road from me that there's always between 6 and 8. And 2 years ago, that covey was about somewhere between 30 and 50.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Last year, I didn't see quite as many birds. As far as roadside counts and what I'm seeing, I don't see sharptail until crops are out, ever. Just don't see them. They don't come out to the road the same. Pheasants, yes, I'm seeing more young pheasants. They're not fully mature. The roosters don't have long, but they're almost that size. They're probably the size of a sharptail right now.
Okay.
Or close.
Yeah.
So partridge, haven't really seen them yet, but they're the same way. They tend to be out in the crops.
Yeah.
They'll come in and gravel. I don't know if, honestly, I should look it up sometime. I don't even know if sharptail gravel. Never thought about it.
I don't know that for a fact. I would just assume based on other grouse species, maybe, but I guess I don't know that either. So
yeah, I've been here 15 years, never see sharptail until it's hunting season. And generally, I see the majority of the birds when all the crops are out.
What about grasshoppers? You seeing those right now?
No grasshoppers.
No. Is that unusual or not?
Last year was the same way.
Okay.
But I don't have any wheat around me right now. That's where I tend to see them more.
Okay.
It's corn right now. And frankly, I'm not going out into the corn. I'm not going out in any of their crops.
Yeah.
A lot of sunflowers this year, though. More than I've ever seen before. So that's nice.
Biggest flock of sharptails I ever saw was it was in South Dakota late season. So they were grouped up at the time, but we were parked next to a sunflower field and was with the land. Greg Cronkite, listeners would probably know it was his old place. And he's like, usually we see sharptails in this sunflower field. I think it was cut at that time. And it was like, we got there and we're kind of just about to start looking, and we looked up in the sky, and I mean, I couldn't, it was so many sharptails. All my hunting was pretty primarily early season sharptail hunting. So I'd never seen a big group like that, but they came right down and landed right in those pick sunflowers.
Well, sharptail hunting, you want it early season. Last year I saw a lot of sharptail around me, and I didn't really hunt Montana much last year, but around me I saw a lot of sharptail. From day one, you didn't get within 150 yards of them. They were all adults, almost no hatch.
Really?
And they say 70% of birds you shoot are first year birds.
Right, especially on a good year.
Last year was really difficult because they were all old birds and they wouldn't let you get close to them. Hopefully it's a better hatch this year. Pheasants, what pheasants need and sharptails need are not necessarily the same, but I'm seeing more young pheasants this year. So
how about the cover rainfall aspect?
Oh my God. It's terrible.
Really?
I have 13 and a quarter acres behind me that I can use. I use for puppies. It's too small for probably a 2-year-old and up.
Yeah.
A 2-year-old, an adult will cover it in 5 minutes. When you were saying you would like 5 acres, I'm just going, okay, what? To pay property tax on? You can't really train on, you can't, I would want a minimum of 40 if I was going to own, and ideally 80.
Oh, so you've had a lot of rain and you've got really thick cover.
Yep. Same. Last year was the same way.
Last year was like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. It is really thick, heavy cover. We had a thunderstorm 2 nights ago. Jamestown's had 3 major thunderstorms with 100, 120 mile an hour winds. I've been spared that, 40 some miles north of that. But yeah, it started out real dry. So I'm hopeful for the brooding season. But right now, a lot of rain. So we'll see. My experience out here is generally the drier it is, the more bugs I see too. Except for this year, the mosquitoes. If you're going to talk soft body insects, yes, tremendous amount.
Lots of mosquitoes.
And flies. But then when you have a horse, you end up with more flies. So
Sure.
But mosquitoes are terrible this year. So that will help. The thing I'm not seeing that is unrelated to hunting, I've seen 1 honeybee this year. And I've got a row of lilacs that is probably 50 plus feet long. Never saw a honeybee in there.
And it's usually covered on a good year.
Yep, it should be.
Yeah,
I was talking to a friend in Illinois, and he said that 60% die off in the last 2 years of honeybees.
Wow.
Which does not bode well for upland hunting because you need them to pollinate, for forbs and whatnot.
Native flowers and
Yep.
Hmm.
So we'll see it. I'm always cautiously optimistic.
The upland bird hunter always has a faint hope of optimism.
and my advantage is I don't care if I shoot a bird. Hunting for up to 2 weeks in October. I've got friends coming the last week of October to hunt around here, and literally I can go out every single day and hunt. Do we have the bird numbers we did when I moved here? Nowhere near. I never used to go more than 10 miles from the house. Never. And as a general rule, I go more than 10 miles to hunt. So it's the loss of CRP and grasslands is really tough here.
Well, I appreciate the field report, that's for sure, Mark. And I'm sure the listeners do as well. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you for sharing some of your expertise and experience. I really do appreciate it. And
maybe more experience than expertise, but
hey, it all counts for something.
Yep.
It's a podcast after all.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. I love it, Mark. Well, I appreciate it. Is there somewhere listeners could go to learn more about you, get in touch with you, that sort of thing?
I don't have a website anymore. I would say Facebook, either my name or L'Etoile du Nord Kennels, which you should know what L'Etoile du Nord means.
I don't think I do now, but
oh, come on! You live in Minnesota. It's the Minnesota state motto.
I can see du Nord, right? Or I'm getting some
Star of the North.
Star of the North, L'Etoile du Nord. Okay,
it's on the flag. It's on the motto. It's everywhere.
Shame on me.
Well, I lived in Minnesota when I first started, so
yeah,
that's how I ended
down
up
in the big
with
city and doing big things. So
yeah, yep.
All right, Mark, I appreciate it, and thanks for joining us on this episode of the Birdshot Podcast.
You bet.
Hey everyone, it's your host Nick here. One more thing before you go. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Birdshot Podcast presented by Onyx Hunt. Be sure to subscribe and follow the show so you don't miss our next episode. And if you really love the show and want to contribute above and beyond what you already do by listening, you can do so by joining our Patreon community. Click the link in the show notes to this episode. You can sign up for as little as $5 a month. And if you do, I will send you some of these Birdshot Podcast can coolers and stickers as a thank you for doing so. Thanks, everyone. Catch you on the next episode of the Birdshot Podcast.